Welcome to Doc's Lab and our second Master Series. Welcome to Friday night's video in our second Master Series. I do believe this is the 96th video in our second Master Series, the 45th video on basic processors, the 8th video on sculpting processors, and in this video we're going to talk about filtering your audio and the importance of it. I've talked about this a lot, and there is a segment on my first Master Series about editing that I do think you should go back and review. But I wanted to address this really quick because basically that, when you get a capture that, the importance of you getting as good a capture as possible and then filtering it when you're done is two things you need to really focus on, because the work we're going to be doing in this segment is very delicate. And, things that are in the file that, the work you're going to be doing is conflicting with, is riding above the work you're trying to do, or anything like that can be a problem. Sometimes you can balance things out, that you've got some noise, that's some gritty noise in there or something. You can balance it out with a little bit of gray noise, and it actually makes it sound cleaner, just like doing dithering when you're formatting to an MP3 or something. And you can do that with a lot of the tools to compensate for what's going on. But the cleaner the file is, the better. So as good a capture as possible, and filtering. There's a couple different things. The biggest thing that you have is your EQ. If you go back and watch that segment on editing, you want to do a good job in your editing. But just filtering, looking through your file for anomalies, listening for anomalies, and then filtering. High and low pass filtering, cutting out as much bad and negative as you can, and attenuating any issues. You got some honkiness up around the mid-range. You've got a couple areas up here around 2K and around 5K that you've done a little bit of notch filtering that, is cleaning it up, making it sound as good as possible. That these are huge things, because when you start doing noise, saturation, distortion, and adjusting harmonic content, you are most of the time doing some very delicate work. And anything conflicting with the work you're doing is going to cause you to not to do a very good job, or it's fighting with stuff that you didn't clean up. You'd be really surprised how much garbage you can clean out with a filter, and it's really a study into itself. We're not going to get that deep into it because the concept's pretty simple. You're trying to filter out as much negative things that don't sound good, things that you don't need and things that don't sound good in the file. Anything unneeded and things that are causing it to sound bad, you want to filter out. And it's a pretty simple concept. The filters in our studio aren't like MATLAB. They're not that good of filters, but they do a pretty good job, if you apply them correctly. So spending the time to filter these things out is huge. And once you, get that in your head and start really practicing it and applying it, take some captures and practice your filtering and doing as good a job as possible with all kinds of VSTs, your microphone, whatever you're working with, and practice cleaning it up with your filtering. There are other pieces of software, like I recommend RX7 or RX, because you've got, you can see issues in the beginning of the file, in the file, anomalies that are happening, little issues here, there, wherever that you can go look to clean up, and you can really get pretty precise in trying to clean up any issue you hear or see in the lower end, the upper end, wherever the issue might be. And use things like spectral denoise. This thing can really, can get pretty complicated, but you practice it, it can really clean your file up well. You get things like voice denoise. Voice denoise is another one that can do really good repairs, and spectral repair itself that can actually repair areas that are having issues, even short files or a length of a whole entire file. You've got all kinds of things. Mouth declick, deverb is a huge one, because sometimes the stuff that's captured in your capture, that it can be in the tail. It gets multiplied in the reverberation that was inherently in the capture, that multiplies any garbage that you don't want in there. So deverb is another thing that can really help you clean it up really well. And, things like debleed. I took a capture of my silent room, to have a noise file of my room that I record in, so I could drag it into this debleed, so that any of my captures I can run through this, it'll compare it against my capture, against that debleed file or my noise file from my room, and try to get as much out of that as possible. And this tool is great. It does a great job at doing that. Breath control, declip, decrackle, de-ess, de-hum, de-plosives, mouth declick, all these things can really help once you learn them. It's kind of a study. There's a learning curve here. There's no doubt about it. But this piece of software can be invaluable, because the more stuff you can get out, it's like, sometimes it's like my voice. You hear my voice, and if everybody can see it different, but in my mind, that if I had a little bit of mixture of gray and blue noise to it, just slightly, my voice just sounds smooth and cool and badass, dude. Oh yeah, with that just a little bit of noise. But if I don't clean it up real well, I've got conflicting things happening that, they're going to, you'll start sounding like I'm adding noise to it, rather than, affecting the transducer that is my throat and mouth, to make it sound like it naturally has that type of noise inherent in it, which it can cause a problem. Sometimes you can balance these things. If you got white noise up in the upper end in a capture, and you add a little bit of blue noise that has a phase conflict with it, that actually smooths down a little bit, makes it sound cleaner. That's the same concept as doing, dither whenever you make an MP3, trying to counteract things that are in there that you can't get rid of, that that you can counteract it. So that's something to keep in mind. But the more time you spend to learn how to clean up files, make them as pristine as possible, whenever you add any of the things that we're talking about, whether it's noise, saturation, distortion, harmonic distortion, or adjusting the harmonics, that you've got. Some of it can be very delicate work and very subtle work. So you really want to spend the time learning to filter and clean up your stuff. And I always recommend RX as a tool, because it's an invaluable tool. It's worth the money. You don't need to buy the advanced version, because it's very unlikely that you're going to be doing that detailed a work. That's repair work, to where your studio is a repair studio. You probably don't need to get that detailed of repair. These tools will do the job just fine. So, this is one of the basic versions, because, I've learned I had all that stuff. I don't use it. I never used it at all, because I make sure I got a good capture. Then I do good filtering with my equalizer, and then I'm going to find myself needing it. Does that make sense? But these tools were invaluable, to where they did a great job, so that I had pristine, really nice stuff to work with. And it can help you clean up, files from inexpensive equipment. You don't have as good of a microphone as you want, and you want to clean it up some, because doesn't sound like a $50,000 microphone, and it's capturing the capture not as good as you'd want it. It's capturing noise and sound in the upper end or the lower end or in the mid range, or and you can clean it up really well with these tools to make it sound as good as possible before you start trying to do your enhancement work with the tools that we're talking about. So this video is not going to be really long, but it's just it's a study that you have to undertake, and it is hugely important in this segment, because of the delicate work you can be doing sometimes. It's like you're going to be adjusting the harmonics just a little bit. you're going to have to adjust them way too much to compensate for the crappy file you have. Whereas if it's a nice pristine file that your work can be, you just adjusted one little harmonic, added a little bit of brown noise, just a little bit of saturation, and it's like, yeah, dude. But if you got dirty stuff where you're pushing that harmonic up way too much, you're adding too much noise, you're adding too much saturation, and you end up getting dirty mess that doesn't, it doesn't sound good. Does that make sense? It's like having, a white palette for painting that's nice and clean, pristine. So when you do this real fine, delicate work with this really light pastel and, and this real light, coloring that's just adding this to it, that's just on this peacock or something, really super light highlights. If you got this dirty thing to work with, it ain't never going to look like that. It's going to look like you're a really idiot artist that has overcompensated with your coloring and mixed your colorings wrong, and it's mixing with the dirt, and the dirt showing through, and so all these delicate paints that you've been working on don't have no effect on it and actually make it look worse than it was. So it's something, I know that sounds funny, but painting isn't that different than, recording. I actually learned how to paint because it was so closely interacted to help me see things as painting. Does that make sense? And palettes, and things you have to work with to make things beautiful. So I really hope you take that to mind. I hope this video helps. And if you have any questions, please drop a comment. But the concepts aren't that difficult. It's more of you practicing it. And be careful, because when you're filtering, you can make a mess of things. Be careful, because you can start causing audio anomalies. You can filter out too much. It's better to leave a little bit of dirt on there than cut out content that you need. So really keep that in mind. And it's better to have something a little bit dirty than cause an audio anomaly or a defect in the audio. So keep that in mind also. And you will find the more time you spend learning how to do these things well, the better your stuff will come out, and the more fun that you'll have doing the things that we're talking about, because you'll be able to hear it. You add that little teeny bit of brown noise, that little teeny bit, and you'll be able to hear it. You'll be like, oh yeah, I can hear it. I can hear it. Where you got dirty stuff to work with, it's like a dirty palette that you don't even hear it until you crank it way up and it sounds like, I got brown noise over the file. Now, what am I doing? Does that make sense? I mean, I know it sounds funny, but it can be very true. So I certainly hope that's helped you a lot, and especially in this segment, how important it is to do good filtering and cleaning on your audio and get a good capture. And peace of love, and I will see you in the next video.